everyone, welcome once again to Spider-Man Page by Page. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And today, Dan and I are going to talk about the first appearance of Doctor Octopus. It's Amazing Spider-Man number 3, and Dan looks excited to get going already.
Yeah, I mean, Doctor Octopus is one of the best supervillains in all of comics, let alone in Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. I like him a lot personally, so this is kind of a monumentous issue to take a look at, and I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. Doctor Octopus gets fleshed out a little bit more and becomes a more interesting character after this, but it's still kind of cool to see, the first time he shows up and things like that.
Which is funny because he's always known as, not the most sympathetic villain, but you love him. He's one of those, you love to hate him because, he's just so pompous and arrogant.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think after Spider-Man 2, there was kind of a shift to make him a little bit more sympathetic in his comic appearances and line it up a little bit more with the movies, which honestly is kind of fine with me. I like his characterization in Spider-Man 2 a lot, and in particular there's a story called Doctor Octopus Year 1 that coincided with the movie that goes into his childhood and parallels him with Peter in some ways and makes him interesting and a little bit more sympathetic. So he's a cool character.
I mean, I don't know if anybody ever did this. I think you could take the AI concept with the octopus arms and really go someplace with that.
I think you could too. I don't think I've seen anyone do anything like what they did with the AI arms in the movie. I don't think that nothing that I've read anyway.
I love that idea. How does that affect identity and stuff? Where the arms have their own wants and desires, but then and they somewhat coincide with what he wants. But then he's also a thinking, feeling person that doesn't want to kill people along the way. So what does it do to him?
Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting question.
And then, you have this, you could almost make it a Venom thing, right? Where, it's a symbiotic relationship. And then once you take the arms out of him, if he gained control again or got rid of them, then how would he feel after that? Would he be able to go back to his old life? Or would he what would it be?
Exactly.
There's a story there that was not told in that movie. There's totally a story there.
Yeah, I don't know, eventually, when Doc Ock comes back, maybe they'll do something like that with it when he's.
I doubt it, but it'd be cool. A cool thing to do with an alternate version or something.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, let's get into this. So, is this the first time that we've had a dialogue balloon on a cover of a Spider-Man comic?
As far as I
or did one of the other ones have it? And I don't remember.
I don't remember. I think there might have been some on the cover of the first issue, and there's some on the cover of Amazing Fantasy as well.
Oh, that's right. Amazing Fantasy had that. I feel like this is one of those covers that sells by itself just on cover.
Yeah, and this is a shot you see replicated all over the place in Spider-Man things, where he's just holding him, with his limbs and things like that. It's really cool looking.
I feel like a lot of people that might not have, gotten the first 2 issues on the stands would look at that and be like, what is that?
Especially since he's in shadow and he's kind of mysterious looking. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? So it's the strangest foe of all time, Doctor Octopus. Now, see, I don't agree with that because I feel like the Tinkerer was pretty darn strange.
Yeah, the Vulture's pretty strange too.
what is strange about him? It's just the fact that he's got these really long arms, I guess.
Ditko's design for a lot of these characters is just so good. The design you see there for the arms is pretty much consistent with how you see Doctor Octopus even up until today in the comics.
All the way up. We never changed that much.
Yeah, exactly. It just speaks to how talented a lot of these people working on the early Marvel stuff were. A lot of the designs that they had originally have never been improved upon, I don't think.
Yeah. Interesting that this is already another crossover with Fantastic Four. I mean, just Human Torch this time.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't believe we've even crossed with anybody else in the Marvel Universe yet. And remember that there are several books already going on.
Yeah, exactly.
This is also, interestingly to me anyway, not one of those books where you open it up and it gives you what you're going to see later. Actually dramatized. It's just here's your villain, and it's almost like just a preview page, right? Where it's like just so you know, here's the cool things that are going to happen, and then when you turn the page, it's not going to look that exciting. But hold on, it'll get exciting.
Yeah, it seems like they're a little bit more confident or want to focus a little bit more on the villain than the previous 2 issues had.
It almost looks like a cover that wasn't cool enough to be the cover.
Yeah, that's true.
And now begin. Okay, I love it when comics tell me to do things, Dan. So, this is a fun little opening where we're seeing Spider-Man finally being kind of just going out on patrol and just beating up bad guys. Like, it's always been like a specific foe that he's had to go out and try to fight for some reason. But again, up to now, it's still he's trying to get something out of it, and this is the issue. I mean, it feels like a giant like plot point for this character, like a giant character turnaround, where this is the issue where he's finally stopping a bad guy just to stop a bad guy.
Yeah, exactly, and it seems like it's going really well for him in this first page here, and everything's working out really well. He beat the Vulture, so he's kind of confident now, and whenever a Spider-Man comic opens with Peter Parker being really confident, he's about to be torn down entirely.
And we are establishing that now. Although the way these read in the sequence, it feels a lot more like I beat the Tinkerer, so I can beat anybody. Yeah. Because that's the last thing we saw him do, and I think that's hilarious.
I like the spider signal, too. That's something that gets forgotten about a lot. And I don't know, in the early days, I always thought the spider signal was kind of cool. It doesn't really serve all that much of a purpose, but I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of just like freak out guys where they're like, wait, what is that? And then I guess it's just a distraction.
Right, yeah. You kind of shine it into an alley before you go down to scare people or whatever.
It took me a while when I was a kid to get okay with that idea, because again, I've told you this before, Dan, but like when I first read Spider-Man, I thought he was like a scary character, and my first Spider-Man was Todd McFarlane's. So the first time I saw the spider signal on a belt, I was like, that is hokey. That is the silliest thing in the world. And then I started to understand this character, and it seems like a thing he would do, and then it got kind of fun. It also immediately makes for a toy you could put out, which
that's true.
Which was put out in various forms.
I used to have a flashlight that shined that back when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean there were projector toys, and I have a Spider-Man toy that's it's like a 6-7 inch figure, and then it's got in the middle a projector, and you like project things on the wall from Spider-Man himself.
Oh, cool! That's awesome.
So now we've got Doc Ock in his Atomic Research Center. Now, I think it's amusing, Dan, that he's not called Otto Octavius yet. He's called Doctor Octopus through this entire issue.
Yes, that's true. They don't really name him in this issue. We don't even get a lot of his personality before he gets the explosion done on him in here, because there is mention of his brain being damaged in the next couple pages that we'll see of his origin, and maybe that's the reason why he's kind of a megalomaniac after he gets the arms fused on.
Yeah, it sure seems like it, and I think it's funny that like everybody calls him Dr. Octopus even before he's a bad guy. That's just his name. Yeah. It's like he's just got these arms, and like nobody else can wear them, and I guess you have to assume it's just a nickname that he's given.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I always thought was kind of cool about Doctor Octopus and Spider-Man.
Oh, I'm wrong. They do call him Otto Octavius. It's on that page.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I didn't see it. Yep, we do get it right there. It's just they call him. They never refer to him. They're like in dialogue. Nobody ever refers to him that way. Okay, so we do get his name right away. But I guess it is a nickname then, Dan. I'm glad I noticed that.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I always thought was cool about Doctor Octopus and Spider-Man, just aesthetically, was to be his arch nemesis. Stanley and Steve Ditko chose an animal to base him on that also had 8 limbs. I always thought that was kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's always fun, and can be like really psychologically interesting to have your arch nemesis, reflect you in some physical way.
Yeah, exactly. And Spider-Man's an interesting character in that he has really 2 arch nemesis, because I think you can make an argument as to who is the better foil, him or Green Goblin.
Green Goblin, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, honestly, I don't like to even try to pick one. Like, I just think you could easily make an argument for either, and they both have a lot of things in common with Peter Parker, except for his youth. Like Doc Ock, he's got the 8 limbs thing going on, but he's also a scientist like Peter Parker wants to be. Doc Ock basically, in my mind, Dan, represents, and even in this issue, I think you could make this case. See, we can actually delve into this, and there's more interesting things to talk about than we've had before. Where this is the guy that Peter Parker would turn into if he did not have Uncle Ben.
Yeah, exactly. He's the guy that's all in it for the attention and the recognition that he kind of craves everyone else's admiration. That's kind of what he wants.
Yeah.
He wants to be remembered and revered by people. And Peter Parker, at least initially, when he put on the Spider-Man costume, had the same sort of attitude with his powers.
They both have an accident that more or less give them superpowers. Doc Ock talks about his arms like he has superpowers. It practically counts, and it sends him in this direction where he sees himself as all powerful, and he is, again, the anti-responsibility villain. And isn't it interesting that we'll see as we go along here that Peter Parker is seeing himself as being he can't be beaten. He can beat anybody, and then it's Doc Ock who has that exact same attitude that he has to fight before he learns some humility.
Yeah, Doc Ock's kind of attitude throughout this whole issue is that because he has the power to do the things that he can to people that makes it just and right. Just because he's more powerful than other people, he can exploit them, rob them, do whatever he wants, and that's obviously totally counter to the way Peter Parker was brought up. And it's like you said, it's Doc Ock without that kind of moral compass.
And he's obsessed. And he's obsessed with this idea of making things and people his servants, because he uses the word servant a lot. And like right on this page, he's like, though others fear radiation, I alone am able to make it my servant.
That's true.
So then I guess we get his origin here, and he's got that same thing from Spider-Man 2, where he's lying on the gurney. He's got the arms draped over him. You can see they were pulling directly from even the first issue.
Yeah, even the fact that his head is all kind of wrapped up. I remember there was bandages on his eyes in Spider-Man 2 when the limbs were flying around. So yeah, they definitely pulled from this. I always thought it was an interesting choice in that movie to make that sort of a horrifying scene like Sam Raimi's other movies that he was directing before he made Spider-Man.
You remember I complained about it when I reviewed it, because I was like, it doesn't match the rest of the movie. It's like something goes into Horrorville and then it leaves it again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I kind of liked it to kind of create a scary vibe for the character in the movie. I always thought it was kind of cool.
Helps make him tragic too, because he's got those bandages over his eyes. So he can't even see what he's doing. It takes a second before you're even sure if he's conscious for it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a unconscious reaction, and you get the feeling that he's kind of just like a caged animal at that point that feels threatened and is reflexively just trying to survive.
But also he's an unwitting participant, because those arms have minds of their own. Yeah. But anyway, getting back to this, so he has the arms are the same, but Doc Ock has a very specific facial type later that he doesn't have here. Like that gets like in the face he gets kind of redesigned.
Yeah, I mean he's still got the double chin thing going on, and we'll see. I think there's a panel we'll see later on when Doc Ock has his shirt off and he doesn't have the harness on, and he has abs. And you're like, oh, that's kind of strange, because he's always thought of being, the kind of portly, weird-looking guy with the bowl cut.
Yeah.
That we'll see later on. But yeah, I mean he's definitely got a Kirby-looking kind of face. I always thought that the big brow that he's got there reminded me sort of the Thing.
Oh yeah, that's a good call. Once again, I really like the parallel and contrast with where Doc Ock is when he gets his powers versus where Peter Parker is relatively shortly after getting his powers and still trying to decide. He's still trying to figure out how he fits into the world, and they're saying similar things. Doc Ock is saying, my arms can do anything, and Peter Parker, I forget if it's already or if it happens after this. He's swinging around and he says, I've got these great powers. It's like I can do anything. They both react in similar ways and see themselves as super powerful and almost godlike.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I kind of wish that in this issue there was a little bit more discussion about Jameson with Doc Ock and making public appearances and stuff like that.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. And so he's still, you know, bringing pictures of Spider-Man to Jameson, and I like how this ultimately later on will end up affecting his personal life, where because he can't beat Doc Ock, he also can't get money for his rent. I really like that.
Yeah, exactly. It ties everything together, and it makes the stakes a little bit higher, and
more personal.
ties the personal aspect to the action in the story, which Stan Lee is always so good at, intertwining the subplots of the stories together.
This is that bit where he's saying, I feel like I can almost do anything. I like these close-up shots on his, on his feet and his hands. I guess, reminding people that maybe, or telling people that maybe have never read this before, what exactly his powers are, but just to, try to put you in his position. Like, if you were able to do this, how powerful would you feel?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it definitely lets you get in Spider-Man's head a little bit and see and imagine for yourself a little bit more vividly how cool it would be to have those powers, how liberating it would feel.
Yeah, and also how hard it would be not to get cocky with them.
Yeah, exactly, and in fact he does, and that's the reason why he doesn't beat Doc Ock in the first place.
Yeah, I mean it's cool. The problem with both of these guys is their hubris.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why they make such a good foil for each other. I mean, in a way that I don't think the Vulture in his first appearance really had the same thing. I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about how he gets fleshed out more later, Doctor Octopus, but I think at least in this first appearance, the parallels are apparent.
Yeah, I mean, I love that about it. He's not. I'm not saying he's a deep character that you
right.
really get in his head and that we really sympathize with him. But he's used as a prop to make Peter Parker more layered.
Of course, yeah.
And certainly throughout it, he's becoming more real to us and more fleshed out. And then you get your what's now very classic Spider-Man jumps in and the villain has to go Spider-Man.
I find it interesting that in Doc Ock's first appearance he never really gets into the classic green and yellow jumpsuit that we know that he wore in the Silver Age for so long. He's just kind of got a white smock on for most of this.
Yeah, which is appropriate, certainly.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I just think it's a little bit more boring looking.
What else should we say about this page? I mean, it's basically just that's right. Doc Ock is this is another one of those places where he's like I have servants and I'm going to use you as long as I need you, and again he's treating himself like a god. Like mortal men are just there for me to use. At my discretion. And Spider-Man comes in and does not even remotely understand the situation.
Yeah, and you get the feeling that a guy that was so adept at science, and especially at the time, for a lot of people, the discoveries that were being made in science in the 1960s, it might have felt like science could do anything for us. And a guy that's that adept at it, and then he gets this physical power, I would imagine that he could imagine that he could do literally almost anything,
Yeah, it's interesting to think of how having powers might limit your imagination.
That's true, yeah.
I'd never thought of that until you said that, but this idea that I feel like a god, I can do anything. And you're not thinking about all the stuff that you could do if you got other powers, or if you actually put your brilliant mind to science and started building more things. You just go, no, I'm done. And that's basically what Spider-Man is doing here, and that's what they're both doing, and that's I think that's why this story works as well as it does.
Yeah, I agree.
The action in this issue, not to be obvious, but is spectacular.
Yeah, I think Ditko is not that he was subpar or anything in the previous issues, but I think the action is getting better. I think he's learning on the job. Not that he needed a whole lot of learning to do again either, but I just think the action in this book was a little bit more impressive to me than some of the previous ones.
I think by accident or not, and I'm sure it would be, and I wouldn't say the action has been rocky up to this point, but doesn't it make sense that it would ramp up and be more spectacular as it becomes more of a superhero book?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like the book is finding itself as this character is.
That's very true. Yeah.
Which is again not a thing that I knew because I've never looked at these real closely. And some of these I've never read, but that does seem to be happening as we're going along. Is that this is a book that I don't want to say the book has confidence issues. It's constantly telling you how great everything is, or at least Stan Lee doesn't have any confidence issues. I think Stan Lee was born with confidence.
Oh yeah.
Anything else we need to deal with on this page?
I don't think so.
He's so he's going up against Doc Ock, and he's met his match completely, and he's grabbed both arms, and he thinks he's all right, but it's not going to work, Dan.
Oh, definitely not. And this is kind of the first time we see Spider-Man try to web the arms, the classic kind of thing. And he goes, "Oh no, he can break out of my webbing. What do I do?" You know?
What do I do? I love that we're kind of mixing it up with the panels a little bit. I'm not saying these panel layouts are like really, really complex, but we've got some like larger panels for some of these action bits. And check out this brilliant idea in my mind, where you go with these really narrow, tall panels, trying to get all of Doc Ock's arms in there. You're gonna see all of it, and you've got this guy who's not super tall, but he's made taller with his arms, and he's got Spider-Man above him, and all. Really good choice there for the panel layout.
No, I agree. It creates kind of a claustrophobic feeling too. Spider-Man's trying to get his way out of these claws, and it's very difficult. I think it conveys the mood of the scene really well.
We take a lot of things for granted now, and we've talked about this some, that would have been a big deal back then to people that were used to reading superhero comics. The superhero just came in, fought a bad guy, and lost.
Yeah.
That's not a thing that...
Thrown out of a window pretty pathetically. He defeated him in about 5 seconds.
Yeah, it didn't even matter that he was in there. In fact, he's not even worth Doc Ock's time. Doc Ock's he's not trying to kill him. He's not worried about the fact that Spider-Man's seen his face. He doesn't care about any of that. He just throws him out the window. You're done. If you come back, I'll throw you out again. I mean, like, I can do it with with most of my arms behind my back. Like,
yeah, it's kind of a horrifying thought if you didn't know about this character and you're just reading the issue as a one-off story. You pick this up off the stands. Like, what's going to happen next? The superhero just got defeated in about 5 seconds. How can he possibly win this? Yeah,
I mean, it's still a world where eventually the hero is going to win.
Right. Yeah.
Or at least you can somewhat interpret it that way, because Spider-Man has this classic history of every time he wins, he still loses. So he might win for the globe, but he'll lose personally in some way.
Yeah, exactly. Or he'll win in the short term and lose in the long term somehow.
Exactly. Yeah. Now I was talking earlier about how Doc Ock's face doesn't look the way I'm used to seeing it look, but wow, third issue and Peter Parker looks like he did when he's married to Mary Jane in the mid-90s.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people credit the way Peter Parker looked for so many years with when Romita took over the book, and that was sort of how it got a much more superhero, clean-cut looking identity. But you can see he takes a lot of influence from Ditko if you go back and look at this stuff.
Yeah, he's faithful to it. He's not just running off. And look at all the mood lighting and how like kind of brutish this is starting to look right after Spider-Man gets beaten. So we got this really chipper, happy, daylight thing, and it's almost like the sun decides to go out as soon as he gets thrown out of that window.
Yeah, and we also see here third issue of Amazing Spider-Man, and he's already contemplating throwing the mask away.
Yep, Spider-Man cannot stop saying, "Is it gonna be the end of me?" That's his. Yeah. And I like that he needs, ultimately, and we'll get there, the advice from another superhero to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. I think those two characters make a lot of sense to put in the same issue, and I think there was I forget what it was called, but I think there was for a little while a comic book that was a team up between the two of them, and Human Torch and Spider-Man make a lot of sense because they're around the same age and their personalities couldn't be any more different, at least in how they are personally. Like Johnny Storm is kind of what Peter Parker wants to be. In the Spider-Man costume, he's kind of like brash and confident and cocky and things like that, and that's not really who Peter Parker is. It's kind of like a defense mechanism. He's unsure of himself under, like, you know, in his social life and stuff, but Johnny Storm is like the most confident guy ever, you know.
And then once again, like I'm always talking about, then their powers completely reflect all that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, where like Johnny Storm is flashy and he's out in the open and he wants everybody to see him, and Spider-Man's got to be covered head to toe.
Yeah, exactly.
And Spider-Man's got defensive powers. Human Torches are very not that.
No.
No, I mean, there's a paper in there. I mean, that's really cool. And these are two characters that in modern comics we're used to seeing as good friends, and they fight together a lot. I had no idea that was established this early.
Yeah, it is, and that's why I thought it was so cool when Hickman brought Spider-Man to replace Johnny in the Fantastic Four. That's, like, of all the teams that Spider-Man would join, that would be the one to me, because he sort of over the years becomes an honorary member of their family, because they become so friendly with Peter over the years, and I always liked the relationship he had with them.
Well, and also like that it wasn't a necessity; it was a tribute thing.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
It was like he wasn't even always with the team in that book. Like Hickman did a really good job. Sorry, we'll get back to this in a second. But Hickman did, I thought, a wonderful job in that book of sometimes the team would go on without Spider-Man because he had like keeping up with how difficult it would be to do all those different things, and so Spider-Man would just show up when he happened to have the time to do it, just because he wanted to respect the memory of his friend.
Yeah, exactly. Some really cool artwork on this page from Ditko. I always love whenever he does the over-the-top coloring, like the one with Doc Ock there with the red background. Everything's yellow to make it look more exciting and kind of ominous looking. He did that sort of thing with the explosion too, and I don't know. I always think stuff like that's kind of cool.
Well, and he also does that to direct your eyes to certain things and to outline what's important in a panel and what he really wants you to think about and take from it. So I mean, like you said, really ominous figure there. Obvious why the background is red, but I mean, really easy to go in and read some of these panels. As a little bit more than just stylized.
Oh yeah, I mean, the way that, obviously, you and I both know the way that these comics were made, but for people that don't know, possibly, a lot of the time, Stan Lee, Romita talks about this when he was working on Amazing Spider-Man. Stan Lee would just plop the name of a villain on his desk and be like, make a story about it, and Romita would have to draw it, and then Stan Lee would just write all the dialogue in afterwards. And, Steve Ditko plotted most of the early Amazing Spider-Man issues, and Stanley got less and less involved with the plotting of this book as it went along, because he was writing so many different things that he didn't have time. It wasn't like he was neglecting his duties or anything. He was just working on so many things he didn't have time to fully plot all the stories of all the books. So it's interesting as you go along here, seeing how the plots get a little bit more intricate as Ditko gets to plot the book a little bit more. It's cool.
Yeah, I always thought that was interesting too, and why the book is so dynamic and visual. I mean, I talk about this all the time, where it's a visual medium. You shouldn't rely too much on words. And one thing that I don't like about Stan Lee is his obsession with making sure that he's as present on a page as the artwork is, because there's a lot of panels where it's very clear what's going on. You don't need anything else. But I mean, take a lot of the words off some of these pages, and it's very clear what's going on.
Yeah, Stan Lee is not one to leave a panel without words on it. It seems like every panel needs to have some sort of words on it, whether it be a thought balloon, dialogue balloon saying what the people are doing when they're fighting, or
certainly it can be
something like that.
Certainly, it can be part of the artwork, and I like how Stan Lee liked to highlight certain words and bold things and try to make the words as dynamic as the artwork, but that only goes so far.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That is a creepy looking Doctor Octopus.
Yeah, really great panel there. And I like how Doc Ock as a threat is immediately presented as much larger than the ones of Spider-Man's faced before. Like,
Good
the
point.
Vulture was trying to steal a diamond. Now we have the U.S. military concerned. Like, what are we going to do about this guy?
Yeah. And I also think it's really fun, like we were talking about earlier, where, he's already met what will become his greatest adversary, and he's not thinking anything about it.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Like, these are both. What's kind of fun about it is that as Spider-Man learns, again, a little bit of humility throughout this book, these are both characters that are underestimating each other. And when we get, to the end of this, that ends up being Doc Ock's downfall in exactly the same way it was Spider-Man's. But this is not a lesson he's going to learn.
Right, exactly. So we get a little bit more dialogue for Aunt May, who has been largely not had a speaking role since Amazing Fantasy 15. And she didn't really do all that much there either. Obviously, Aunt May becomes a much larger character as we go along here. But I think she kind of, shows up at the end here to remind readers that this how bad of a thing it is for Peter that he can't take these photos, because Aunt May was in a large part relying on the money he made to keep the household afloat.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And again, direct consequence of him just barreling in without a plan and thinking that, well, he beat a guy who stole a diamond, so he could do anything.
Yeah.
And this idea that Johnny Torch goes to the school and gives a talk, I think, is hilarious. It's amusing that it's tied directly to this Doc Ock thing, where he comes in and he's like, "Don't worry, kids, we superheroes and they're on the case," while I'm standing on stage writing out math problems with my fire.
Yeah, I love how Johnny Storm is tasked with beating a supervillain. The first thing he does is go out in public and make fun of the Thing in front of people. That's so Johnny Storm.
Yeah, I mean, it comes off like, well, he just has spare time because I guess he has to wait for his powers to recharge. I didn't know that was a thing that Johnny Storm had to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest FF guy in the world, so I think that changed later, and they kind of forgot about that, but I'm not entirely sure.
We retconned a number of things with powers, right? I mean, because we talked about this before, but you still have the thing in this issue in a couple places where Peter Parker's spider sense just lets him do what he needs to do in a scene, and it gets real specific in this one.
Yeah, there's at the end of the issue where he goes to find Johnny Storm, he's kind of like, "Oh, my spider sense is telling me that this is where he's staying," and that's just random. That's just what the plot needs the spider sense to do in this situation.
Yeah, that makes your spider sense brilliant intuition.
Yeah.
Before it's like I said, it's supposed to be like a warning thing. It makes me want to go in and find out what spiders actually are able to perceive.
I always thought the idea was when you try to swat a bug, it always seems like they're one move ahead of you. Like, if they see something moving and they fly away immediately, they're hard to hit. I always thought that was sort of the idea behind what the spider sense was, but maybe there's something scientific about it. I haven't really looked into it, to be honest. I
mean, looking at what he does at what it does in these, I mean, I doubt it, but maybe. Yeah, I mean, growing up, that's what I always thought too. But then you look at these, and it actually so far has almost never been a danger warning. There's been other things. Also, spiders are not the only animals that have that. I mean, you ever try to hit a bird with your car? Or not on purpose, but you're driving toward a bird and a lot of animals have that.
Yeah, I mean, there were points where he'd get bad vibes about specific people, but it wasn't he's about to be hit by a car. Well, in Amazing Fantasy 15, he jumped out of the way instinctively, but the spider sense was never really mentioned.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know that you would need spider sense for that necessarily, but maybe
he was daydreaming at the time and didn't notice it, and he just kind of.
Okay, that's a good point. So maybe it was spider sense, yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't really mention it, so.
I also really liked it. Keep in mind, it hasn't been that long since Spider-Man had to go up against the FF for a minute, and all of a sudden, as he's maturing and growing, and realizing what a fool he's been here, he's sitting in the audience of this assembly, and Johnny Storm, this guy that he went up against before, has changed his whole outlook.
Yeah, it's really mature of him to go past the petty the petty grievances you might have with Johnny Storm and the Fantastic Four and realize that he has something to say that's valid, and he speaks to his humility, that he's willing to look critically at himself and what he's been doing so far.
Well, and I think that Stan Lee's walking this tightrope where it would be really easy, if you're not careful, for people to just think that to have a difficult time caring about Peter Parker because he makes so many mistakes.
That's true, yeah.
Where, like a character is not humanized just because they have flaws. You give a character nothing but flaws, and it's just as bad as a character that has nothing but good traits. It's exactly the same problem, and so that's the thing you have to walk. So it is about time that we give him a straight up, very very clear character arc.
No, I agree. And, Stan Lee always makes it out to be that simple, like the characters that he made were popular because he gave them flaws. But I think even he knew that there was more to it than that, obviously, because of the way that the characters were rendered, even in his work, I mean,
this is a really important moment for liking and appreciating this character and finding him endearing.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And now, Peter Parker gets dressed.
And we also get the kind of classic slingshot thing that Spider-Man does with his webs, and we see that in the first Raimi movie when he's on the bridge and he launches himself via web slingshot. There's a lot of things that Spider-Man does with his powers in these early issues that in the Raimi films are directly taken from this stuff.
And all things probably you'd want to credit Ditko for before Stan Lee.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So now he's had, and I mean, this could come off as hammy and too quick, but I think within this context it works. Where he's had the big speech given to him, and then now he has a better sense of what to do. But what I like is that the speech isn't given directly to him.
Right, exactly. It's to a group of people.
I mean, he could have just as easily been in a church and heard a sermon or something.
That's true. Yeah.
I really like that. But again, the source is important too.
Oh, yeah, exactly. All of these panels of Doc Ock and ominous lighting are so cool. More of that stuff I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, a whole lot of yellow in this issue, and a lot of that's probably because of radiation. And this is, of course, a period where we're still, dealing with a lot of radiation stuff, thinking about the Cold War and coming off of World War II from, just a couple decades earlier. And also, Stan Lee talks a lot about how it's just really easy to give people superpowers by just going to radiation. Radiation.
Yeah, it kind of made sense back then because we didn't know a whole lot about radiation. So it's like maybe if radiation was injected into a guy with robot arms, they'd graft onto him and he'd become a supervillain. No.
See, this is one of those. I think this is a good example of a place where we could have kind of just not had a dialogue balloon at all. Where when Spider-Man is being shot at with electronic bolts, as he calls them, and he's like, with my spider senses, I'll do this and this, and it's like, no, you can tell exactly what's going on.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I don't need you to tell me that. Now again, I'm not complaining too much. That's modern convention of the day. That's how we did comics. And
importantly, the reason they did them like that was because Stan Lee always said the first issue of any comic book that he was working on could have been someone's first. So they would put things in like that to kind of tell potential new readers the conventions of the powers as they were happening in action and things like that, so they wouldn't feel lost.
I think it's important, by the way, to mention that was true back then in a way that it's not now.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Where
that's why I'm speaking to your point as the conventions of the day versus now.
Yeah, I mean, I hear people now try to quote Stan Lee and say the same thing, where it's like every comic is somebody's first comic. I don't think that's true anymore. We just have so many. When you get into I don't know, you get into an Image miniseries. You get, you know what I mean? You get into Sex Criminals #3. That's probably not anybody's first comic. It could be, probably not.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
No, yeah, you're right.
Maybe Sex Criminals #1 is somebody's first comic, but I doubt very seriously that the third issue of that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
I've never had another place to make that point. So anyway.
Peter Parker's using his mind to solve problems, make conventions, things like that. I love that about these early issues because that's something people forget about in a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man just kind of beats things up and doesn't use his mind. it's important to a lot of these early stories. I like that about
Again,
it.
it's really important to do it here too, because it shows you once again a similarity that he has with his villain, and that these two are actually very evenly matched.
Oh yeah, exactly.
They're already kind of evenly matched. I mean, I'm sure Doctor Octopus is probably a more brilliant scientist than Peter Parker at the age of 14 or whatever he is, but
Yeah, I think he's like 15 at this point. Yeah, so he's definitely. I mean, Peter Parker has the potential, I think, to be greater than Doctor Octopus, which is kind of an exciting thing about the character, right? It's kind of like untapped potential in a person, and he's kind of figuring himself out, and you want to see where he ends up. That's the interesting part about it.
yeah, absolutely. A more muscular Spider-Man in this issue than we've seen before, I think.
Yes, that's very true. He doesn't look like he doesn't belong in the costume like he did the first time he put it on in Amazing Fantasy 15, where it looked loose and baggy and stuff.
And so now he, as you said, he's thinking as opposed to just going. And it's so important. I just thought of this in this issue, that he doesn't actually come up with some way to beat Doc Ock with his powers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, he uses his agility to like jump around a lot and stuff, but he's relying too much on his physical ability early on when he says nothing, I can beat anybody now. I took out the Tinkerer. I can.
Yeah, trust in his new physical powers, in not using his mind, is the thing that is his downfall ultimately.
Yeah. Again, like I said earlier, kind of limits him a little bit.
It does. Right.
It makes him detached and kind of makes his mind numb, and it's really when things become too easy, that's when you stop trying.
Oh yeah, exactly.
There's just so much truth to that, just real truth to that. So he's got these chemicals, and he fuses the arms together.
Yeah, and we get the classic thing on this page of Spider-Man in his first appearance, blinding Doc Ock in the glasses with his web. That's a classic thing you see in almost every Spider-Man Doc Ock thing.
Yeah, and again, I love the way we've shaped that panel, where before we were going up and down, now we've spread it out so we can spread those arms this direction and get all of that there in the same section. But I mean, like, there are places where I'll see an artist take up more space on a panel where it almost feels like it's got to be bigger because they're taking a lot of pride in what it looks like.
Oh yeah, exactly. And it's just kind of seeing a fight like this from a different angle too, right? Like, because if it was drawn too similarly to the last fight, not only would it have different implications for the way you're supposed to perceive the story, but it makes things a little bit more dynamic, because you feel like even though these people have fought and the fight's going to play out pretty similarly from a physical perspective, I mean, there's not all that much different you can do when Spider-Man's fighting Doctor Octopus visually, but we're seeing everything from different angles, and it feels just as dynamic as the first one.
Yeah. I like that he says that the best defense is a smashing offense, because again, Spider-Man does have a tendency to be kind of more defensive, and he doesn't always come at things with a plan, and that kind of it helps to show you what he's learned with all this.
Oh yeah, he's a scrappy kind of character.
And yeah, like I said, I don't want to be a broken record, but I don't know. The action of this is just really, really dynamic.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like that. He immediately goes and like wraps the arms up in the web. I always thought that was kind of weird because it didn't seem to work earlier, but I guess he's wrapping it many more times.
Well, and maybe Doc Ock's just so off balance now.
Yeah,
that it's a little bit easier for him to get away with that. Where like I mean, physically off balance. Where like if you had a sheer footing,
right? Yeah, that's true.
Then it might be a little bit easier to do that. I don't know, or maybe it's just an oversight. I don't know. You know what I've always wanted? Maybe it does exist someplace, because I mean, there's a lot of Spider-Man. I've always wanted to see the mutant, the Man Spider, versus Doc Ock.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Because now they got the same number of limbs.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there. And then...
So we're shining the spider signal on the wall to signal the fact that he's tied a villain up, like, at the beginning. So that's the primary use of that, I guess, initially, which is cool.
Yeah, and it's cool that, like, you know, he's learned a bit of humility, but he's still got style.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where, like, he still thinks he's the bee's knees, you know? Like he's still leaving, you know, his trademark calling card on people, and, you know, he's got this sense of pizzazz about it. You wouldn't want him to get to the end and have this entire woe was me attitude. Oh man, I've got to second guess everything I do now because I made this mistake. Like, I like that it, you know, it doesn't go that far.
Yeah, exactly. You know, You kind of root for him to act that way, because it's like he was so successful in using his intellect to beat this guy that you want him to show off a little bit.
Yeah, he's kind of deserved it now.
Yeah.
You know, where you got to keep that in check to a degree, but he just went too far in one direction. But you don't want to swing the pendulum all the way to the other side.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Again, he thinks about swinging the pendulum to the other side because he almost takes the costume off for good.
That's true. Yeah.
Spider-Man, it's very simple, Dan. Spider-Man is simply a swinging pendulum. That's my review of Spider-Man comics, all of them. And then it's kind of fun that Spider-Man goes up to Johnny Storm and he's like, "Thanks a lot, dude," and then he just leaves. And then Johnny's like, "What? What? I don't know what you're talking about," because he doesn't know who that is.
Yeah, and we kind of end with the classic irony that we've seen play out in a bunch of these scenes in the issues so far, and where Flash Thompson's sort of ridiculing Peter Parker for being a wimp, while Peter Parker's, you know, and in this specific scene, speaking aloud, but sometimes he's thinking like, oh, you know, if only you knew.
Yeah, some of those lines almost seem like repeated and verbatim between issues, where it's just like, we got to do that again. And it feels like almost, it might not be, it feels almost like a throwback to the way some, most of the, like, George Reeves Superman episodes ended, where, you know, you'd have Lois say something about Superman, and then he would kind of wink to the camera, and we have exactly that kind of thing going on here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But the difference, of course, is that the point here is that everybody thinks that they're, you know, stronger and better and less wimpy than Peter Parker, and he's got to kind of keep that under his hat.
Oh yeah, exactly. Whereas, you know, I mean, Clark Kent kind of has to do the same thing, where he has to act bumbling, but the people that
but he asks for it and gets a kick out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the people that are perceiving Clark Kent as a bumbling dude like him.
Yeah. He's generally not bullied about it.
Right, exactly.
Well, anyway, so that's the end of that. Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this one quite a bit. It's good stuff.
I think it's solid, I think it's the best issue that we've covered so far. Just in that we finally have a villain that, contrasting with our hero, tells us a lot about who our hero is and the journey that he's on.
Oh yeah, and I can't wait till we get to the Master Planner arc in this run, because all of the Doc Ock stuff kind of builds to a place, and it's really good stuff. Like the seminal issue where Peter Parker's trapped under all that debris and there's water and stuff. That's part of the Master Planner Doc Ock stuff. So yeah, that stuff just gets much better later on.
Cool. I can't wait. I think this is an okay for him, even not knowing too much about him yet. But I think partly that's just in comparing him to the other villains we've had so far, which are even more blocks of wood.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know who our villain is for 4?
I haven't looked at it in a while, and I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment.
Let me see if I can find it real fast. Here, I'll just real quick, I'll find out for us.
Okay.
Da-da-da-da. Sing a song, Dan. I'm just kidding. Spider-Dan.
Spider-Man
does whatever.
I like that
Spider-Dan
violinist
does.
lady from
My kid watched that for the first time the other day and thought that was the funniest thing in the world. Oh, it's Sandman.
Oh yes, that's right. It is Sandman. You're right.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was that early. Wow. Oh wow, this issue has a lot of the floating heads going on.
Yeah, the floating heads are a Spider-Man staple.
This is going to be interesting because this issue looks a lot different than what we've been looking at.
Yeah, it does. You're right.
Cool. Oh wow, I don't know. There's some iconic looking stuff there. Anyway, well, everybody, you're not looking at this, but it's awesome, and we'll tell you about it next time. Everybody, thanks as always for watching. We sure appreciate it. I hope you're still enjoying Spider-Man page by page. These are long and meticulous, and we're taking our time, and that was the point. And we will be covering issue 4 for you next week. Hope you'll tune in. And in the meantime, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And we'll see you next time.